Welcome to the Kickstart Podcast, where we highlight the stories of how professionals kickstarted and navigated their successful career. My name is Preston, and on this episode, we have the pleasure of hosting someone who has an impressive career from working as a developer, program manager, and a product manager at some of the most well-known tech companies before deciding to start his own company that is taking on the e-commerce world by storm. Ro, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Preston.
It's my pleasure. So I guess first and foremost, for those that are unfamiliar with you and your background, your story, would you be able to maybe share just high level, high summary?
Yeah, totally. I am an engineer by education. I went to the University of Waterloo. After that, I did what many young engineers do, and I went to Microsoft in Seattle, where I worked on the Office team as a PM, and then always wanted to start my own company, and I thought I was going to do it then, but got the unbelievable opportunity to work on Uber Pool in early 2015, and that was the opportunity that I couldn't pass up. And honestly, much of how I think about product in the startup world and business comes from my experience basically taking Uber Pool from, a small idea to a huge global multi-billion dollar business unit within Uber. And a few people know this, but many of Uber's innovations came from the Uber Pool team out of necessity. Things like upfront pricing instead of surge, things like walking to a corner so that your car doesn't have to loop around the block. A lot of that happened out of necessity when I was working at Uber Pool. And kind of fast forward after that, I worked a little bit with Travis in LA on his Cloud Kitchens thing for fun while I was setting up this company, and then bringing over my Uber homies that I worked with on Uber Pool to help me start and run this company.
That's amazing. There's so much to unpack there. So I would love to kind of talk a little bit more about Uber, a little bit more about the transition that helped you successfully start your own company. But backtrack a little bit. I couldn't help but notice you started your career in a technical role. So you were an engineer developer by trade. Is that correct?
Yes, this is something I still wish was a part of my life in some way. I love to code, and was when I started my career as a coder.
And that's something that you've always wanted to do for a long time. Did you go to university and graduate in computer science, or?
Yeah, I actually went to the University of Waterloo and studied system design engineering, and they have a really awesome formula or a stance on how engineers should think about programming. We would learn the theoretical part of engineering and computer software and computer science in the classroom. And then if anyone knows Waterloo, you have a bunch of these internships where you can then go put that stuff into practice. So I would be an engineer who codes every 4 months during these internships at these awesome companies, and then was also able to learn about like the theoretical side of engineering in class. And by the time I graduated, I'd already been a professional engineer who knows how to code in many different languages. And so it kind of set me up for success. But I would say the one thing that really changed my mind and kind of leveled it up, and I would say for people who are in this, I'm an engineer but love product design, there was one pivotal moment for me. And that was I did a exchange program through the university, a 5th-year program, where I partnered with a school in the Netherlands, a design school, and they specialized in what we now know as product management. And what they did is it was an awesome program for engineers to go and learn design principles. When I say design principles, I mean like true fundamental design principles that could be how do you make a physical product in the world, all the way to how do you design, a tech-enabled experience for grocery stores. And so when I was there in Europe for a year at TU Delft, what it was called, I really fell in love with this idea of I now know I've built the skills and I now know how to design user interfaces, code the products that I've designed, and then work with users to kind of refine it to figure out how this can be built into a business. And that was kind of the turning point where after I came back from that program, I actually just went right into product management with Microsoft rather than going down the engineering path.
That makes sense, because my next question was, how did you go from working as an engineer to pivoting into program and product management? So I know Microsoft by title, you were a program manager, but it sounded like it was more of like a product manager, or is it kind of both coincide one, or maybe at that time it was the same thing? Like what did your day-to-day consist of at Microsoft?
Yeah, good question. I think that program management and product management are terms that describe the same function, right? And that is you are given a set of business metrics that you own. And your idea is or what you do is fundamentally figure out which features customers wants to drive those metrics in the direction you want them to go in. And, there's consumer facing features, there's back-end features, and you could be a product manager who caters to one or the other. But really my time at Microsoft was, how do we help people be more productive through email? And I worked with Outlook. And at the time Outlook was going to the cloud. They had their web experience, they had their desktop experience that everyone knows about. And so the transition was pretty easy for me. I think I advise all young engineers who want to get into product management to think of it less of, I think there's a big push to get into product management because engineering is hard, right? And I think the best product managers are actually great engineers and coders, and then realize that so much impact can be made by speaking the language of the tech team. And then also being very, very close to the customers and building that skill set of translating customer requirements and wants and needs, which many of the times they can't even figure out how to articulate. And then going to a team of engineers and designers and saying, look, the skill set that I've built is I know how to translate these things into an awesome product. And the only real way for me to build that thing is through a team. So that's where I think product managers should focus. It's the best product managers are not trying to escape their computer science degrees. They're trying to leverage their computer science degrees, layer on some design thinking, and then realize that they can bring their ideas to life by managing a small team of designers and engineers.
So from what I'm understanding correctly, your background in engineering, you think in retrospect has helped you become a better product manager. Is that right?
Oh, 100%. I think that it's not a necessity that you are a computer scientist or have a CS background or an engineering background to be a great product manager. Do I think it's a superpower for a product manager to know how to talk in a technical language that engineers understand and make technical trade-offs alongside their engineering manager? Yes.
Yeah.
I think there is something beautiful about being able to understand how something is built and then perfecting the skill of not allowing that to cloud your user research and design judgment. And it's a superpower if you can master it, and it becomes a hindrance if you can't, right? So the flip side to that is if you're not able to be objective, you will allow your, I know how this is built and it's going to be hard part of your brain to actually not allow you to find the best answer.
Yeah.
So I think it's a leg up for people who can refine that skill. It's also a hindrance for people who allow that part of the brain to kind of take over.
Yeah. I think that's super interesting, Ro, because, product managers today, I think a lot of them have really, really strong kind of index experience in either design, business, engineering, but it seems like, your experience as an engineer, your experience, even going through that internship that even gave you exposure to design, you kind of have almost a holistic overlap on all three, almost a trifecta, if you will. And it's kind of reminds me of the old saying, like, you can't, if you haven't done it yourself, how can you communicate with people, or how can you let alone coach or teach people doing it, right? And so I think by you being an engineer yourself, product managers, obviously in the technology industry, specifically at software companies, work hand in hand every single day, very closely with software engineers. I mean, the fact that you were one, I'm sure, like, there's no ramp up time. You were able to hit the ground running very, very quickly. So that's very, very insightful, especially for people who are listening. Quick question though, how did you get into Microsoft? Were you headhunted? Was it like a cold apply? Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, I think I was lucky enough to be in one of the feeder schools that Microsoft comes on campus during the fall semester and essentially does a bunch of engineering and PM recruiting for. So Waterloo's for anyone that's looking to go to Waterloo, I think it's a great school for prepping you for being in technology. And one of the things they're really, really good at is lining up these employers that can really, really help you with your development of product management. So honestly, it was as simple as I came to my final year, I applied to a bunch of jobs like everyone else, not knowing if I would get an interview or not. And then of course, once you get the interview, you got to go do your thing. But it wasn't something that I planned from a long time ago. I knew that I was always going to be in the tech industry. I always knew I was going to do something that either was starting my own company or going somewhere where I can understand how a company should be run. And I would put Microsoft in the latter, right? It really gives you a good example of like, all these companies that were starting, all these startup founders, what I say is my time at Microsoft was so valuable because I was lucky enough to see what happens to a company when you're running $1 trillion market cap company.
Mhm.
And now you understand when you like go through all their processes and everything, why they do the things they do. But yeah, to answer your question kind of succinctly, I just applied through my university and was lucky enough to get an interview.
That's super cool. And how long were you at Microsoft for?
I was there about 3 years.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, 2012 is when I joined, and I was there until 2015, where early in 2015, Uber was lucky enough to recruit me.
Yeah, for sure.
And I would say enough for me to understand how big companies work, and then enough
Mhm.
for me to understand why I don't think for the foreseeable future I'll be working for a big company.
So throughout your tenure at Microsoft, at one point, did you ever look back and be like, you know what, I should just be an engineer again? Or were you just, it never crossed your
Yeah.
mind? You're like, you know what, I embrace product and program management. Let's move forward.
You know, what's really funny is looking back, every
Mhm.
single weekend and month that I was at Microsoft, I was actually coding and building my own company on the side. I don't speak about this a lot, but one of my early company's ideas that I loved was I got a Google Glass. And so it was an AR, geo-located like AR product that was pretty fun that I was
Mm.
building. I did a couple other side projects around consumer apps for fun. So I was never really not coding. And for all the engineers that got that dopamine hit from hitting the compile button, I never lost that through my whole time at Microsoft.
Mhm.
I think when I truly, even Uber actually, I was coding on the side all the way through to the point where I think like 3 months into Pietra, when we were just a small company of a couple people, my CTO had to come to me and said, "You are not allowed to code anymore. You're the CEO and the founder. We got this under control. We have an engineering team now that does this." And so, yeah, it was hard to kind of move away from coding because it's fun, and like pouring a cup of coffee and writing code and putting your headphones on is really, really fun. But eventually I have to, scale myself out of that role.
Yeah, for sure. So then you joined this massive company and then you left to Uber. Obviously, everyone listening should be familiar with Uber by now. If not, I don't know what to say, but you joined Uber. How was it again? How did you just end up going to Uber?
Interesting story is we were all sitting in Seattle. We were kind of done with Seattle. We've kind of got everything we needed to get out of the company in terms of our career growth. And so all of my friends actually moved to New York, and I applied to an Uber role in New York. And I remember getting a call from someone at HQ, and over a couple of phone calls, I was just, pitched this idea of like, this would be a huge opportunity in your career. This is a once in a, generation company. It ended up being a once in a generation company for me, where I would learn everything I needed to learn about a startup with the Uber Pool team. And they weren't wrong. I think this was something that Travis was very, very close to as a project and as a product line. And I was one of the lucky few people to say yes, not knowing what I would get into, and then finding out that it was the best thing that could have ever happened in my career. And that's learning what a true like hyper growth startup that's, on top of everyone's mind, it's making global impact every day. Learn about what it means to be a part of that company. Learn about how to run a company, how not to run a company, how to actually own something that truly you can impact the world every day. Like, I'm not kidding. One of the most fun things that I tell people about my time at Uber and why I think young creative people should take opportunities like this is we got to do things like design a feature, launch it at 2:00 in the afternoon, and by 5:00, your friend is using it in a different city. And getting that feedback loop of like, holy cow, like we actually are changing the way people move around a city, and we're getting that feedback. And I think that is something that every person who's excited about startup land should look for. I think it was one of the best things in my career where I was like, holy cow, like you can build world changing things. And then on the more practical side, which I think is one of the best skills that I learned at Uber is, and I tell every young PM to do this, which is understand how hard it is to get people to slide their credit card on your and buy your product, whatever your product is. And you will realize through that process, you should not take for granted people paying for products. Everyone thinks it's actually quite easy to do so. And so join a company, if you're a young PM, join a company where you get to own a metric of a customer paying for something, because it will teach you all of the hard skills very quickly. And Uber was no different. UberX was a juggernaut. Uber, Uber Black was a juggernaut, and we were Uber Pool. We were getting people to share their ride 50% of the cost of Uber X and make it so that people were happy about that experience. And that's what I learned through the process. And again, once they told me on these recruiting phone calls, like what I would be missing if I left it, it was a no-brainer. And I think I left Microsoft on a Thursday, and I literally drove to Seattle on a Saturday morning. And by Monday, I was in the office. And let me tell you, if anyone that did work at Uber knows Uber, 8 a.m. on Monday morning, I was in the office. By 9 o'clock, Travis had already seen me and said, "Oh, this is the guy that's fixing Uber Pool. Okay, get to work." And I was like, wow, that's the fastest you're new here to the work begins now that I've ever experienced in my entire life.
Was there another company, like as a plan B in the interview process before you decided to join Uber, that you were thinking about joining, maybe one that was much smaller? How big was Uber when you joined, to put it into context for people who are listening?
I'm trying to think back. It's been so long now. There were probably a lot of companies in the mix, but I think none of them are coming to mind that really had a chance against it. And I think there were thousands of employees at Uber, including all the ops teams, by the time I joined. In 2015, Uber was a really, really cranking, and their UberX product was phenomenal and growing worldwide. And the main reason why I joined Uber was I got to experience what it's like to actually build Uber Pool, which at the time was just an experiment in a couple of cities. And, that really just thought about this idea. But, by the time I got there, they already had an office that was a couple of floors in a building. So it felt kind of big, but our team was like this amazing unit of like, I don't know, 8 people, 10 people, 15 people, grew to like 60 plus by the time I left. But yeah, I can't really think of the companies that I was looking at, because that's a mark of good sales pitch. But once I heard the Uber sales pitch, I was like, I'm going there, even if I'm, the 1,000th plus employee.
Yeah, you were all in. It's again, it sounds like you had everything just went very, very smoothly. And then, a lot of the feedback that we get with the people that we talk to every day, especially in the technology industry, is some of the biggest concerns going into a company like Uber, which are already pretty massive, right? It's like, oh, am I just going to be like another cog in the wheel? Or is my work going to be meaningful? Am I actually going to be able to get like direct feedback from not only stakeholders, but the customers? I think the opportunity to potentially be a part of a small team within a company like Uber, I think is like the best of both worlds, right? You get that like early stage exposure, kind of the whole experience, but one that's obviously in a much larger, a lot more established software company. But the fact that you were able to get like direct feedback, you're able to really just kind of almost scale this team from 0 to 1, if you will, from Uber Pool, and playing a pivotal role in helping that become just massive in a company like Uber. I think that's something everyone is probably shooting for when it comes to like, looking for new jobs. So it seems like you've done a great job in kind of checking off all the boxes. You started off at Microsoft, which is a massive company, and then you joined another pretty big company, but still smaller. What was the biggest thing that you learned at Uber at that time that was, aside from like, the fast pace, aside from like, maybe a little bit more of chaos joining a smaller company or a fast growing one, what was the biggest takeaway from coming out of a company like Microsoft that at that time has been around much longer? They have established systems and processes. What was like, wow, like this is like really, really cool, that you learned or you were able to kind of really take with you throughout your career at Uber that you didn't get at Microsoft?
Yeah, great question. It was very clear to me as soon as I stepped into that office, where I felt with every fiber of my being, that the world's smartest people were working on these problems, and that the problems were extremely hard. And I felt like, and this is a culture thing, I felt like I wasn't just in the major leagues. I was playing shortstop for the Yankees. Like that's another level of like perfection you need. And what I really learned that I value to this day was Uber, and Travis gets a lot of credit for this as he worked with our team and me closely, which is the company didn't put up with any kind of ownership that wasn't total and complete end-to-end ownership. We had this cultural value, which was owner, not a renter. And so I remember, at these big companies, you can often get one small piece of one small pie and then kind of optimize it, and you don't really change the business. With Uber, it was, you're going to get a huge chunk of responsibility that's going to meaningfully impact the dollars and cents of this company. And you need to develop the skill set to be so quick at problem solving and be right about it that you need to know everything about this business. Like I remember, and this is a skill that wasn't really something that I see even now, and why I think the Uber Mafia is like so well positioned to be the next generation of like world changing leaders, is at Uber, there were no nonsense. You knew all of your metrics that you needed to know. You knew all of the parts of the company that you needed to in order to get your product and your business to grow. And there were no, it was an environment where vague responses would be met with, wait, you say things are going well, but give me 5 metrics that show me that it's going well, right? There wasn't like, we had a tough week, our numbers were down. It's like, no, pull up the spreadsheet and exactly what metrics went down. What are your ways that you're going to fix this? And what are the ways you're going to monitor it for the next, X number of weeks going forward? And so I think there's a lot of, to summarize like how I felt leaving Microsoft and going to Uber, was at Microsoft, you didn't really have to get so deep into the weeds and explain why things weren't moving in the one direction or the other direction. There was always some reason to say like, yeah, we tried this, but it didn't work. And there's some excuses here and there. We'll try this again next week. And there was never this fire that was lit under us, right? We would say like the deadlines are not real deadlines. And at Uber, it's not only that their deadlines were real, they were 10x faster than I was used to, right? It would literally be like, okay, cool, let's like do the analysis for how we should change all of the pricing in this city. It could have tens of millions of dollars of impact per day. And it's 4:00 on a Thursday, and let's roll it out by 2:00 on a Friday. All fully tested, all with the math that backs it up. And the engineers have made the change. You got 7 hours, go. And you're like, holy cow, this would take 6 months at another company. And I'm talking hours. And so that's kind of like what I learned, which is my first manager helped me understand like months are weeks. At Uber, it's like months are weeks, weeks are days, days are hours, hours are minutes. And you have to figure out how to operate minutes, like in minutes, and be right about that. So do whatever you got to do as an individual to like learn what you need to learn, ramp up and be right and be quick with it. And so, that breeds a certain level of like, things didn't fall through the cracks at Uber. And just being so detail oriented with exactly what you need to know and building that muscle literally changed the way I look at business, the way I'm a PM forever. And I look for that in people that I hire as well, right? It truly was a game-changing environment, I will say, for entrepreneurs in those early days.
On one hand, it's very easy for companies to tell prospective candidates that joining us, you'll get true ownership. But it sounds like at Uber at that time when you joined, you truly had true ownership. Not only ownership of the products they're responsible for, but it seemed like it was also just a really helpful catalyst to perhaps maybe just getting your business juices flowing, giving you substantial experiences, and perhaps owning a budget, large P&L, high-level strategy, combining all that with your product and kind of engineering expertise. Was it very tough for you to kind of adapt to that speed? I mean, it sounds like if you're able to hold your own and you're able to have really great attention to detail, you know what you're talking about, you're able to execute, you're able to do really well Uber. On the flip side, it could also sound very overwhelming, very intense for a lot of people. Like, how was just the overall like morale or just the culture? Like, was there a lot of people just leaving the company because they just couldn't hack it, or it was just very difficult?
There were so many smart people at the company that I was lucky enough to work alongside, that it never really felt like, oh wow, this is too overwhelming. It felt like, I cannot believe we were all given this opportunity. Like, and that could have been my bubble. I know there's definitely the feeling of like, it was an extremely intense environment, but I think that the company and its cultural values were built around keeping those people. And yes, I think it was not a place for everyone. And it had its problems. And I think I was lucky enough maybe to be shielded by those problems through a product line that was growing. And so I can't speak to other people's experiences on how they were feeling. For me, I remember thinking to myself, my whole life, I've wanted an opportunity like this. And now that I have it, it's quite literally up to me to maximize everything about this opportunity, right? Like, I knew that I was going to learn in 1 year, 5 or 10 years worth of knowledge. How do you start this business? How do you scale up this business? How do you think about costs? How do you design something? How do you look at metrics? You don't really get taught a lot of these core skills from 0 to 1 at a big company or in school. And I remember like 3 or 4 months in, I would go home and people would be like, holy crap, like you work so hard. And I remember thinking to myself, this is kind of like everything a young entrepreneur wants in their life. It's like, you got to take this thing and scale it to be $1 billion business. And you have a P&L and you have probably one of the world's best entrepreneurs to give you guidance every week, right? That you need it. Why wouldn't you maximize that opportunity and ramp up at full speed? And yes, I was overwhelmed for a little bit, but not overwhelmed from the workload. It was overwhelmed from like, hey, wow, so I just control this thing and I report to the CEO on Tuesday. What happens to it? Like, wait, this is like Uber, right? We're talking about. And it's like, yeah, that's the thing that I think I had to get used to the fastest, which is like, yeah, this is all on you and your team. So do whatever homework you need to do to make the best decision possible, and you will live or die by your decision. Don't get scared of it, right? This is what you wanted. You got to live or die by your decision at the end of the day, but you have the opportunity to do so. So I will say, kind of to round that thought up, which is, to me, it was the perfect place. Yes, it was a little competitive. Yes, it was very intense, but to get that experience at that moment in time where you're walking outside and everyone's talking about Uber and you have a new product line that you get to scale up and you get to help build with an awesome team of like professors from Berkeley to, now some of my best friends that hired me onto the team. That's an unmatched energy. And yeah, it's not for everyone, but it definitely changed how I live my life and my career and my view on what I should be doing my career.
And I can see that now. I think from a high level, it's a tech professional's biggest dream, what you went through, right? And if you can go through it once in your career, that's awesome. Some people can experience it multiple times throughout their career. But no, it sounds certainly very, very exciting. And I can see how it was like the perfect stepping stone to then you deciding to work for yourself, which is now what we're going to talk about more, the exciting stuff. So before we get into it, though, I've been hearing a couple of times over the past couple of minutes, you mentioned that you wanted to work for yourself. So is this something that you've always wanted to do, like throughout your life? When did that start? Did it really become real maybe at college or after college? Maybe perhaps your parents were entrepreneurs. Like what was the catalyst? What was the inspiration for you wanting to work for yourself?
Yeah, good question. I wouldn't even word it as me wanting to work with myself. I think a lot of that, I hear that a lot with my peers, and I respect that thought process. But for me, it wasn't like I can't work for someone. What I was most excited about is being able to build something that I can say I built from 0 to 1. And I really knew that I was going to go down this path in university. The University of Waterloo had this really awesome thing for engineers where every semester you're studying, you have one course that is essentially solving a real world problem and trying to build a business around it without actually going and fundraising and building a business around it. But in the final year, you get to do that same project and actually they'll bring in VCs and try and get it funded. And so I'll give you some idea of like what that was like in the first year, it was like create a product that helps people in senior. So I remember designing and learning about structures and building a walker that doesn't slip, which is the number one problem at senior citizen homes, right? Which is like, it's a good example of like, go to an old folks home, talk to some people, figure out their biggest problems, and then try and build a product around it. Of course, you can imagine that like that gives you the first set of like, there's like, you could build a product and you can like literally measure it out and figure out the physics behind it and figure out a product that could be sold. And then there were a bunch of these projects throughout my university. The last one being, I specialize in optical image recognition, and we built a swing simulator for a baseball team. I played baseball in college. And I remember thinking to myself, like, wow, this course is basically, they're like, swing simulators cost $80,000. You guys are engineers, you know how to code. Go build something that you think is better than these $80,000 swing simulators. And I remember me and one of my best friends at the time were like, okay, we're going to try and rebuild the swing simulator, which is the same output at like a couple $100 versus $80,000. And so we would get presented these problems that led our brains to kind of form into, there's a problem, there's a solution, and you could build a business around that solution if the problem is big enough. By the time I was coding on the side at Microsoft, I had already kind of been excited by this idea of, I can think of a product and I can build a business around it. And if it's a big enough product and a big enough idea, I wasn't really into the venture funding game, but at the time, it was like, I knew that it existed. And so I felt like that process was so fun to be like, wow, like you can just go to any type of environment and be like, I can design something here and then build it and then sell it and build a business around it. Like that whole process was so fun. I always knew I was going to start my own business. It's also one thing I'll say, I really didn't like this idea of building incrementally on top of something that already works, which is so much of product management. So many of these big these FANG companies, you don't get to learn the hard skill in life, which is the 0 to 1. The 1 to 10 you could develop at any time. Building on top of something that works, like a shuffle feature on top of Netflix, is awesome. But like, trust me, what's the really cool thing I would always think to myself? Figuring out how to pivot from like mailing DVDs to like an online streaming platform, right? Like that's the intuition and insight that was always exciting to me. And I think you only get that from trying to start your own company. And I forget who said this, but you only really realize that something doesn't work once you're like 40% in with both feet. Right? When you ask yourself like, hey, why doesn't this company exist yet? It's like, you're never going to get the answer from the outside. You have to go in, you got to go all in, you got to iterate on the solution. And then you're going to find out once you're deep water, whether it works or doesn't work. And then you'll be faced with am I going to innovate and be the person that innovates through this? Or is it not going to work?
So. I love it. So how did you decide to leave Uber? Like, or why they just felt like, your growth was limited, it wasn't challenging anymore, or what happened? Can you walk me through how do you go from Uber to now being like, I want to build something of my own from 0 to 1?
Yeah, I know exactly the day I thought this, which is my experience with Uber and any, young company was that I was learning like crazy every day. I didn't care about anything other than truly understanding how to build an awesome company. The day that I decided that this wasn't for me anymore was I had a product spec that I had written the previous year that didn't get built, right? Because there's planning cycles and there's like some stuff gets cut. And I remember copying and pasting the entire thing and only changing the date, like going from like 2021 to 2022. And I remember as I pasted it in, I said, okay, now the world is repeating and I've probably outgrown this business. People don't know this, but we've launched many different products that all died at Uber, like shared rides products. And once I started like rehydrating different documents that didn't make the cut, I knew like, okay, this was a sign that I was starting to fall into a pattern and I wouldn't get as much out of the company as the company would get out of me. And so I was like, it's time for me to bounce. It ended up coinciding with a lot of the restructuring of the executives, but at the company. But I don't tell a lot of people this, but it was literally that moment where I reshared a doc of a feature idea that I had. And I was like, damn, like now it's literally just a cut and copy. So I probably just learned what I need to learn. It's time for me to like try and apply these skills in the real world.
Yeah, if you wanted to sign, that was it. So how quickly did you start? So like, did you have already like for example, an MVP already made, because you said that you're coding a lot on the side, perhaps you did that at Uber, like, how did you raise your initial pre-seed or seed? Like, how did that go? Or like, first of all, what was the idea and what inspired you to even kind of pursue the idea?
Yeah, what's interesting is like it was all very organic. So we started our company as a completely different company. I went into a phase of I knew I was going to leave Uber and I started ideating. Like I now had, many years of experience being like, let me just analyze an industry and understand market opportunity and is there something here? And that was equally balanced by the just thrill of starting a company as well. And I learned through that process how important it is to pick a product and an idea that you truly love before just jumping into a different market just because you want to start a company. I remember the company started with my friend saying, hey, and again, I don't say this story very often, but it actually started as a fine jewelry marketplace where my friend was in the Uber cafeteria and was like, it's so weird that in, 2018 or something like that you still need to know a guy to like make a custom engagement ring. And I was like, why can't there be like a network of fine jewelry suppliers in the world that you can just tap into and make your custom engagement ring for? And they can all bid in an open marketplace, et cetera, et cetera. And we did our market validation, which is like, I built a small prototype with an iOS app. At the time, it was called Carbon. We got a couple of jewelry suppliers on the platform. We talked to a bunch of customers. We actually did all this while I was working at Uber. And then, I left and I still kind of worked on it, but it was a fun little side project. And then as all, products do, I think it evolved into something a lot bigger, what we see today, well past jewelry into all these different product lines. But we followed the process of, we had an idea, we built out a prototype. I was lucky enough to like be excited by learning Swift and, building that and sending it to the App Store. We probably got 50 to 100 users on there, proved out that like people do want it, and then looked back at ourselves and said, okay, if we want to build this company that's this global marketplace, we're going to need some capital. And so we then engaged our the Uber Mafia, I like to say, and other VCs. Shout out to Andrew Chen for taking a flyer on me. And we basically did the pitch and we said, look, this is what we built. This is the market opportunity. We think we have something here. And then, like I said, Andrew, the man that he is, took a chance on us and put in a seed check. But we didn't skip any steps. And it was a little bit scary to leave Uber without like knowing you're going to get funded. But at the same time, I think what it did was it really forced us to like go through the process and not do this trap that I see a lot of young PMs going into, which is I just need to like stay back and prove it out 100% before I can like take the leap and quit the job. Right? What I say is, and what my experience was, you're never going to be 100% like convinced that this thing is going to work. You're going to get to at best 70%, at best 70%. And then you're going to have to make this call. Do I want to take a leap of faith and try and build this out and see if the last 30% is there, or to which I have to quit and do this properly and make it my full-time gig? Or do I want to sit back and wait till someone else takes that risk off the table and maybe join the company at series B, C, D, E, But this idea of I will find out that this company works before taking on any risk and quitting my job, that's never a thing. In my experience.
It's like any big decision in life, you'll just never know, right? At some point, you have to take the plunge. So for people who are thinking about maybe becoming an entrepreneur, Ro, and like the first step is, hey, obviously, you need an idea. You need to maybe build it out, at least an MVP. And it seemed like when you say we, is it you and another co-founder? How many of you were there in the beginning?
Yeah, so it was me. It was me and my co-founder, Pan, who was our CTO now, but also our engineering manager at Uber. So I remember the day that I came back from vacation and pulled him aside and said, look, this is going down. And he's like, and we've been homies for so long. And he's like, dude, for sure, let's go do this. And so we went from there. We recruited a couple other people. I remember I was working at Cloud Kitchens at a part-time basis, advisory capacity, just for fun, to kind of like, I was doing like fun product management consulting is what I like to say, just to pass the time. And I met a couple of other people at a barbecue and I said, look, this is what we're building. They said, I'm going to quit my job and join you guys. And I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. I did that to a couple of people and we always had like a little tight-knit group of 4, and we didn't make everyone like leave their jobs and take a leap of faith. I think me and Pan did, which was a very big step forward for us as friends and business partners and all of that stuff. But we tried to build, like me and Pan tried to build a very safe environment, or as safe as you can make it, which is we would do something like, we want you on the team. We know you're excited. We know there's risk on the table if you leave. So let's do the best we can to de-risk what we can. This is how we need you to plug in. This is what we're going to do to get to funding. And then we kind of got to a spot of, if we get funded, will you then join us full time? Right. And so me and Pan, shout out to Pan, he took the leap of faith. I took the leap of faith. And then the other team members were working with us in a part-time capacity until this contractual obligation of, when we fundraise, if we fundraise, then it's time for us to make the leap. So we planned it out as best we could with like 2 or 3 people. Now we are here today. It's kind of grown from that.
And I think the biggest takeaway is the importance of having at least one of the co-founders. Here, you had the luxury of you and Pan both having a technical background, because in the software world, in technology, if you have any experience engineering, you have an idea, you can just code it yourself, right? And I think that's where a lot of the struggles come from founders who either one or both of them don't have any technical background. Now they have to scramble and try to find someone with technical background to create the MVP. So here you guys have the luxury, and you could have just probably done this by yourself. You probably didn't even need Pan, but the fact that you had Pan together combined, you're like, hey, we have an idea. It can accelerate the whole process. You put it to the App Store. You were able to talk about it, and it just sounds so easy. But I think I just want to emphasize for people who are listening, the importance of having someone with a technical background that can execute to a certain point, at least in the beginning, to get the things moving.
Totally. And to add to that, you're totally right. Well, quick aside is, Payne is probably one of the smartest people I know, so I definitely could never have done it without him. But I will say, if he's listening, there's no way this would have been possible without the sheer brilliance of Pan. But I think what I advise younger founders now is, don't underestimate the feeling that you will get just knowing that you could build it yourself if you had to, right? Like, this is something that I felt a lot in the early days, which is knowing that I could open up Figma, design the UI, open up Xcode, build the app, open up AWS, configure my backend, led me to have a confidence while talking about the business and fundraising in a way that I knew that at the end of the day, like if I need to take a couple of months, I could just sit down and build it if I needed to, right? And ultimately what you realize is you're never going to build it yourself, because like once you have a venture scalable idea, one of two things is true. It's either something that is going to be a big company, in which case maybe you can get the MVP, but you're going to want to get real engineers in there fast to figure out how to build it because you're tackling an opportunity that's super big. Or you're going to get the feedback of like, if you think that you can like build this yourself and it's super small, and like it may not be a venture backable idea, right? Maybe it is actually so small that like you can just do this on a Saturday and someone else can do it on a Saturday and you don't really have a competitive advantage and you don't have a venture scalable company. Where we ended up was, I remember going to the first VC meetings with like the comfort of like, look, if this doesn't pan out, we'll build it. Like we know we can do that. And if we had to go back into the work shed and build for 2 more months, we'll do it. And the thing I say is, I think VCs understand that as well, which is like, they're like, look, like they will do it. But now it's a matter of, are we putting fuel on the fire? Like, do we just want them to go faster? Why would we send them down this path of building something for 10 months when they can hire an engineer and build it in 3?
Yeah,
like
for sure.
So I do think it helps if you ever have the ability to like learn those skills, do it. Like it's going to give you the comfort of like, I'm asking for money to supercharge something that I know how to do. Rather than I need money from you and it won't work if you don't give me money, right?
Unintentionally, it's like the FOMO feeling you're giving to the VCs puts you in a position of power. We're going to do it with or without you. Might as well do it with you.
Exactly.
So to this date, what does your company do in the simplest terms?
Great question. There's about 23 of us now at the company. What our company does is we help creators start and scale their own product lines. And what does this mean? That means that if you are someone who has thought about launching your own candle brand, skincare brand, clothing line, we build a platform that allows you to do all of the core parts of your business through one dashboard and still launch a awesome e-commerce business. We give you the tools to find factories to manufacture your custom products. Right? Let's say you want to launch your own skincare line. You could find a factory that will ship you samples of a custom formula that you could work with them on. We give you access to a fulfillment network so that when you're done making 500 units of your lipstick, right, with your custom formula, you don't have to worry about finding a fulfillment center and shipping your products around the world. In a few clicks, we will organize with your factory to ship all the products to a fulfillment center that you don't have to worry about. And you'll get a call saying, hey, all your products are on the shelf. You're ready to go. And then the third part of our business is we give people the tools to either create their own socially optimized websites to sell their products or connect their websites that they already have. And so when you put these 3 things together, product creation, product shipping, e-commerce tools, you basically realize that you have a platform that allows people to build multi-million-dollar businesses without ever having to hire someone or learn how to run a supply chain, how to build an operations team. Right? What they can focus on is all the creative fun things. What products do you want to launch? How do you promote your products? Right? We see these creators all different sizes. A lot of people say, can this only be, for the people who are like the Kim Kardashians of the world? And the answer is no. We see people, and I won't name any names, but we see mega celebrities that are household names right now that have businesses that are running using Pietra, all the way down to the blogger with a very, very small following launching her own candles business in the middle of the country. And we just give you the tools to make it incredibly easy to launch your own business.
Wow. So it's like all in one platform. Like if you had an idea, instead of having to do all these things manually, you can just do it all in one-stop shop with Pietra. Is that correct?
All in one-stop shop, all in sequence steps that you can follow along. Like first step, find a supplier. Here's all the suppliers. Second step is setting up your business. Here's all the things. Here's a checklist for how you set up your business. And again, the goal for us is to realize that the tools we're building for these creative people are built in such a way where creatives should be doing creative things. Meaning you should be promoting, designing, working with their factories to make a cool new product, right? You want to make a candle line. How about you make a candle that looks like a bowl of cereal or a chicken wing? Right? Like that's the cool creativity that we want. you don't need to be worried about like, will this be able to ship to the Bahamas in 3 days or less? It's like, don't worry about it, right? Like we will handle all of that backend stuff. You work with your suppliers to make the products that you think are super cool. And our goal is eventually to power all of these branded product lines and give creatives ultimately the tools so that they can build and scale and own their businesses more than they have been able to do in the past.
How many different varieties of different types of products can people use Pietra for? Is there like, are you limited or can you do most of it? Like, kind of curious.
Great question. I think like the last 10 years has been really, really focused on made to order products. And you can probably make about like 30 great made to order products, right? Where you're kind of stamping a logo on a t-shirt or a mug or a cell phone case or what have you. In some cases, making slides or something like that. Our business is built fundamentally different. You can work with the suppliers in our network and literally talk to them and view their profiles to make just about anything in the world. Like you can work with Kim Kardashian's supplier to make a product that you want to create. And you can make everything from athleisure to streetwear to candy to coffee to sneakers to skateboards to, oh man, beauty products, hair care, skincare, home goods. Our job at Pietra is to find every single factory that makes everything in the world and put it in front of creative people and say, you can now use them in a really, really easy way on like a Saturday morning after you pour a cup of coffee. And so you can literally right now go in and use the same suppliers as Gucci, Revolve, Asics, Nike. And you could chat with them and say, hey, I would like to make this garment, for example. I'm building an athleisure line for new moms or a streetwear brand for kids on the Lower East Side, whatever it is. And you can literally communicate with them and develop samples and have your products made. And that's the power of this platform. It's not, here's 10 things, submit a logo. Well, it's quite literally like, you want to make a candle line? How about we work with you to develop your fragrance? Yeah.
It sounds like a game changer for those that have gone through the whole Alibaba manually reach out to vendors, right? And just going through all that themselves. A couple more questions. So if someone was excited to kind of use Pietra, like what's the sign-up process like? Is it free? Do you guys do like some sort of monthly subscription? Is it like a one-time payment up front or on the back end? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, good question. So I think the easiest way to explain it is anyone can sign up for Pietra at any size of creator, from 0 following to 50 million followers, right? You can then use some of the free features to plan your business. We offer some workshops that you can attend. There's a lot of these cool little features of like, we'll help you put a plan together for what it's going to take for custom packaging and custom products. And let's analyze your audience and see like what stuff your audience is buying. So there's all these cool freemium features that you could use. And then once you decide that it's time for you to actually start your business, you pay $39 a month to get access to all of the infrastructure that is basically the most competitive pricing in the world. Think of it like how you pay Amazon Prime to get access to like free shipping, but then also Amazon Video, like Prime Video and Prime Music, and you get all of these benefits. That's literally how the platform works. You sign up, you subscribe, you get access to all of the infrastructure, and then it's up to you to use whatever you need to run your business. And everything is done with upfront pricing. So you might find a candle supplier who you really love, and you can order suppliers directly through them. And you're paying the supplier $5, for example, for a fragrance sample. And you're doing that all on the platform. And as long as you're paying your $39 a month, you have a platform that can support the business that you're creating. And so it's very, very simple for people that want to sign up. Go to pietrastudio.com, hit the sign up button, browse around, and when you're ready, subscribe to the platform and follow the steps that it tells you to bring your product to market.
That's awesome. And for the listeners who possibly maybe want to work for you or work for Pietra, like it seems like you have a team about some sort of roughly around 20 people. And I can imagine you're going to continue to grow and scale, which is obviously very, very exciting. Like, do you have an office? Are you fully remote? What's your take on that? And if you can maybe share an X factor on why you think like Pietra is an exciting place to work compared to all the other companies out there, especially in the space, like we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so we definitely have folks that are remote, but we are headquartered in Soho in New York, and we're primarily an in-office company, as much as an in-office company with tech can be, right? People work from home all the time, but we do love this idea of like a bunch of us come into work every day, and we're excited about working in close proximity and brainstorming and being creative and everything that comes with being in the office. And we have a team in LA and San Francisco, so we're hiring across all functions. If you're a PM, if you're marketing, if you're growth, if you're engineering, if you're in operations, we have something for everyone. We are going through a hyper growth period right now. So while everyone may not be in that position, we're fortunate enough to be like, if you're smart and you want to jump on a rocket ship and learn something, then please join. And I think one of the most interesting things about Pietra and why I think it attracts a certain level of talent is we get to live in the best of both worlds. You know, Pietra is this really, really cool business where I can open up Instagram and see someone whose business is being powered by Pietra and the tools and the software that we build. And so it's super sexy in that way, right? You get to like get that feeling of like, holy crap, like, and you'll see some of the people that we work with, you're like, whoa, this is like a James Bond actress. Like one of the Bond girls is deciding to start, you can like imagine who that person is, wants to like start a business and we're going to power them. Like, wow, that's pretty cool. We have the fun of our company getting to be in that consumer land. But then underneath, we are actually building this tech scalable company where you learn the true nitty gritties of like how fun and hard it is to scale a tech company, a global tech company, where you're building software and you're designing features. And so I think very, very few companies in the world have the ability to be global, solving a global issue, right? Everywhere in the world, people want to start businesses. So this by default scales everywhere in the world. So very few businesses have that. And then also have this, we have a bunch of people in their early 20s who are working on a company that then has like this thing that's tied to what they've grown up on, which is social media. And we're catering to these customers who are like, wow, you see them out in the world. And that's kind of cool to be celebrating, you know, a mega celebrity's launch is like amazing, right? To get to be a part of, and then getting to come in every day and saying, wow, there's no one else in the world that's solving this problem. Like we are truly on the frontier of some of these problems where we sit in a room as a team and we go, there's no Googling the answer to this. There's only us innovating and figuring out the solution for the rest of the world. We're literally first. There's 10 competitors who are 3 years behind. And very, very few companies, I think, get to be in that position. And I was lucky to see that with Uber. And now with Pietra, we see something very similar. And like I said, if that excites you, then please hit me up, ronak@pietrastudio.com. Just email me directly and we'll make sure you get connected to the right person.
I love that, Ro. Thank you so much. And I just want to ask one more question. I know we're short on time, but if there's anyone who's thinking about starting their own company, if there's anyone that wants a successful career in technology like yourself, is there one advice that you want to share with those that are listening?
Yes, I think don't wait to do it is what I would say. The biggest regret that I have was not starting 8 months earlier. And I think don't fall into the trap of thinking you need to learn some skill from some other company in order to start your company. Almost guaranteed that you are going to realize that everything you've learned at a company is going to be nothing compared to the onslaught you're going to face from starting your own company. So the best way to do it is to get in the game as quick as possible and get over the hump. Way too many people that I talk to, even now, are like, I got to stay here for 2 years and then I'm going to learn how to start my company. I think like the reality is don't wait. Most likely what you're learning in those 2 years will be very different from what you need. Maybe there'll be 20% overlap, but if you have the idea of starting a company, do it. You'll thank yourself later because things take harder. Things will take longer than you think. And so waiting 8 months is not going to help. You might as well get to that solution and the answer faster. So don't wait is my feedback if I was to make it succinct.
Don't wait and just have action. I love it. Ro, thank you so much for sharing a little bit about your career, the awesome job you've done going from developer to program to product to even co-founding Pietra, which is obviously doing awesome things, and truly excited to see where you and Pietra and the team are going to go from here on out. But I definitely got a lot of valuable nuggets and insights, and I definitely want to appreciate you taking time again. And best of luck to you and your team, and we'll be rooting for you from the side.
Thank you so much, man. Have a good one.
You got it. Take care.